Hello and welcome back. I'm Joseph Hoffman, and today we're going to learn to play the A section of Andante by the composer Johann Christian Bach, son of the great Johann Sebastian Bach. Now, remember that Johann Sebastian had 20 children, and well, that's a lot of competition for time with Dad. And when you did get time with Dad, it usually meant a music lesson. But hey, you couldn't ask for a more qualified teacher, right? Johann Christian was Bach's youngest son, born when Bach Sr. was already 50 years old. Like many of his siblings, Johann Christian followed in Dad's footsteps and became a professional musician, at first working as a composer and organist for a cathedral in Italy. After that, he moved to London, where he continued to compose, he got married, and he even got a job as music master for the Queen of England. What we're listening to now is one of his compositions that probably would have been heard by the Queen herself. Let's now have a listen to Andante by Johann Christian Bach. Let's check out the score for Andante. I always like to come up here and first check out our clefs, treble and bass clef. Then our time signature is 3/4. You'll see we don't have any sharps or flats for a key signature, which if we think about our ladder of fifths or fourths, we know we'll be at that bottom rung, 0 sharps or flats. So it could be the key of C major or A minor. How would we tell? Well, our best clue is to look at the first note or the first chord that we play, and also check out the last note or chord that we play. If you haven't already, be sure to download and print this score yourself so you can do these activities at home. Go ahead and pause the video and see if you can figure out if we are in the key of C major or A minor by analyzing the first and last measure on your own. Figure out what key we're in, then press play to go on. Did you figure out what key we're in? Well, you can see that we start on an A, and then if we put all of these notes together in the right hand, we have an A, C, E, which forms an A minor chord. And then what do we end on? The right hand ends on an A here, and then the left hand, if you put these 3 notes together, A, C, E, we see another A minor chord ending on A. That makes it very obvious that this piece is in the key of A minor. Now, let's see if we can analyze some more of these chords in this first A section. We've already figured out that this first measure has an A minor chord. And remember, our symbol for A minor is capital A, lowercase m. In your own music at home, please write in these chord names. And again, we're talking about these. You'll notice we have this kind of broken chord pattern, A, C, E, C, A. Okay, but we're going to, for a moment, just kind of put all those notes together into one chord to analyze them. Now, briefly looking at the left-hand part, you'll see we just keep repeating this A. When you repeat the same note in a low voice while the chords are changing up above, we call that a pedal tone. And that note is not necessarily a member of the chord, which can be called a non-chord tone. So we'll ignore this A down in the bottom for analyzing our chords. Let's just focus on the notes we see in the right hand. Looking at these 3 notes, you'll see it's the same notes going up and down. So if we put those together, we see we have an A, D, and F. Now, what chord is that? Well, you can see that it's an inversion. And the clue to know a chord is in inversion is that there's this fourth here. Remember, in the first measure, all of the notes are a third apart, and that's our standard way to build a triad. We have our root, third, and then fifth, all put together to make the A minor triad. Now, in this next measure, where we have that A, D, F, when we see that fourth, we know we're in an inversion. We can take this D and F and put it down an octave to see that this is actually a D minor triad. Now, one other trick to help with that is wherever the fourth is, the root will always be the top note of the interval of the fourth. So in other words, if you see a chord and you have a third and a fourth, the way to find your root, which is the name of your chord, is look for the fourth, and it's the top note of that fourth. And so since that's a D, we know we are a D minor chord. Second inversion. Now let's take a look at this next chord. What three notes do you see? We've got a B, a D, and can you name that note? If you said G sharp, you're correct. Now, think about what I just told you, and can you figure out the root of this chord? If you said G sharp, you're correct. Because remember, you look for the fourth, and it's the top note of the fourth. We have a third here, and a fourth here, which tells us we're in inversion. So let's look at that on the keyboard. See, we've got this G sharp here. If we move it down here, here's our root position chord. That's a G sharp diminished chord. The way we write that is with the capital G, sharp symbol, and then we can write D-I-M. Sometimes you can put a little circle symbol to mean diminished as well, but this is also a way you can draw it. Now for this next chord, I'd like you to pause the video and see if you can analyze and figure out this chord on your own. Remember, if the notes are all in thirds, then you're already in root position. But if you see a fourth in any interval, then you'll know you have an inversion. See if you can figure out what the chord is, and then press play and we'll tell you the answer. So for this chord, we have a C, E, and A. And since you can see that fourth there between the E and the A, you look for the top note of the fourth. That A is our root. So we could take that A and put it on the bottom to get our A minor chord. It's A minor first inversion. Now, why are we taking the time to analyze these chords? I have found that when I know what chord I am playing, I will learn the song much faster, and I'll be able to memorize it better too, because it helps you find the patterns. Now, I have 3 more chords for you to analyze. Today, I'd like you to pause the video and see if you can analyze the chords in measures 5, 6, and 7. Remember, if they're all in skips of a third, you're already in root position. If you find a fourth, then you'll have to be thinking of an inversion. So press pause, see if you can figure out these 3 chords, and then press play and I'll tell you the answer. Okay, here are the correct chords for measures 5 through 7. Here we had an A, C, E, and you can see those are all thirds, so that's our root position triad for A minor. Then here we have B, D, F. Once again, it's already in root position. We can tell that because the notes go line, 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 so we know those are all thirds. And how do we know it's diminished? It's because of how many half steps between each note. All right, that shows us that it's B diminished. You can also tell by the sound. And then here's a G sharp diminished chord, G sharp, B, D, once again in root position. And then if we look down here at the left-hand notes, I didn't tell you to analyze this chord, but you can see the left hand comes down low here to play A, C, E, A, which is our A minor root position chord. Okay, let's come to the piano and try to play it. First, let's focus on the right hand part. And I'm going to teach you a time-saving technique. When you're learning a piece that has a lot of broken chords like this song does, the trick to learning this even faster is just practice them as blocked chords. Then instead of playing 5 separate notes, you can just play one thing as a blocked chord, and you've just done one thing in the space of time. You could have done 5 things. So we'll play this A minor chord, and then try this D minor chord, second inversion, which you'll probably recognize as our 4 chord for A minor. Okay, then we come up here to this G sharp diminished first inversion chord, using finger 1, 2, 5 on B, D, G sharp. And then we finish with an A minor first inversion chord. Okay, so all together we have A minor, then D minor, G sharp diminished, then A minor. Now, press pause and on your own go through and practice those 4 chords, playing them as blocked chords, then press play to go on. Good, now let's look at the next 4 measures. We've got another A minor root position chord. Go ahead and play that with me. Then everything steps up to a B diminished root position chord. Try that with me. Then in measure 7, we come down to this G sharp diminished chord root position. Now you'll notice here in the fingering, you've got a 1, 3, 5, which is the fingering that I prefer, but sometimes you get a choice with fingerings. You'll see that 2 in parentheses. That means if that doesn't feel comfortable for you, you can try finger 2 and see if you like that better. Okay, that's an option as well. And then it comes to an A. And if you use the 2, then you want to use finger 1 on A. And if you use the 1, then you want to use a 2 on A. Now, press pause and practice measures 5, 6, and 7, going to that A for measure 8. Press pause to practice those chords using blocked chords, then press play to go on. Now, let's put all of these chords together. Going back to measure 1, play these chords with me in blocked form. So play an A minor chord, good, then D minor, second inversion, good, then G sharp diminished, first inversion, B, D, G sharp, then A minor first inversion, then we come down to A minor root position, B diminished root position, G sharp diminished root position, and then A. Now, if you need more time or practice with that, feel free to press pause and work on your own, or rewind and try it again with me. Otherwise, let's go on and take a look at how these notes interact with the left hand. If you scan through the left hand part, you'll see we just play A, then A, then A, then A, then A, then A. Do you see a pattern? Then A, then finally the left hand comes down here and plays an A minor triad down low. Okay? Now, let's try and put this together with the right hand part. The left hand is going to play A on this first, on beat 1. Then you'll notice these notes are all beamed together. So they're all 8th notes. Since we're in 3/4 time, we would count 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. So the left hand kicks us off on beat 1. That's a very important note because remember, beat 1 is our strong beat in music. 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Notice in that measure, in measure 8, we have 1 for the right hand, now plays beat 1. Then with that 8th rest, the left hand comes in on the and of beat 1. 1 and 2 and 3. 1 and 2 and 3. Now, on your own, press pause and work on this entire section now, hands together. Go really slowly at first. 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. Then you can gradually speed that up as you get more comfortable. So press pause to work on that section, then press play to go on. Now let's take a quick look at the dynamics. We have this marking at the beginning, mezzo piano dash piano. Well, what that means is the first time through, we'll play it mezzo piano. And then when we get to the repeat sign and go back, then the second time through, we'll play it piano. So we start mezzo piano our first time through, and then you'll see this crescendo. So we're going to gradually build. We're going to keep building until you see that decrescendo. So that kind of tells us we're going to hit a climax around here and then come back down. Then we grow again, and then we come back down again. So those dynamics are giving you some suggestions of some places you could get louder and softer. But remember, even when you don't see dynamics, you can add your own style and find other places that you can crescendo and decrescendo too. Take these as suggestions, but remember that you can add to it. One last thing I want to mention is that as you're playing this pattern and going up and down through this chord, to keep your wrist flexible and kind of roll with the notes a little bit. In other words, when you move up to your pinky, you want to kind of shift your arm and hand a little bit to the side to line up with that pinky, and then rotate back down to line up with your finger 1. It's almost going to feel like your hand's moving in a circular motion as you play these. Okay, you don't have to overdo it, but just make sure your wrist stays flexible and rolls with those notes. Also be sure that your finger 5 is playing near the tip, not flat, like this. Pinky should be near the tip as it plays. Once you feel pretty confident with the notes, the metronome might be a good tool to help work on a very even and steady flow for all the eighth notes. So maybe start it at about 126 beats per minute, and you can just play one note per click. That will feel quite slow, but that again will help you keep it steady. When you can do that with no pauses and no missed notes, you'll gradually speed that up all the way to 200 beats per minute. Once you've got that down, you can cut it in half, back down to 100, and now this is your quarter note. 1 and 2 and 3. That's actually a pretty good tempo, but if you wanted to bump that up to maybe 108, that could be a good final performance speed as well. See how we went from the click being the eighth note to the click meaning the quarter note. So use the metronome as a tool as well. Sometimes be sure to turn the metronome off. You shouldn't always play with the metronome, or your playing can become very rigid sounding. You want the notes to have a natural flow to them. The metronome is just a tool. Great job learning how to play the A section of Andante by Johann Christian Bach. There's still the B section to learn, so please work hard on mastering the A section. Then I hope you'll come back soon to learn the rest. Happy practicing, and see you next time. Boy, can you imagine being little Johann Christian and having one of the most famous composers of all time as your piano teacher and your dad? That wouldn't intimidate me. I'm sure I'd thrive under that kind of expert tutelage. Really? I mean, can you imagine the pressure? I'd be like, sorry, Dad, that I played that wrong note in that famous piano masterpiece that you wrote. You shouldn't be afraid of mistakes, Scuba. Mistakes are how we learn. Besides,
I'm sure Johann Sebastian was encouraging to his kids. I'll bet he was an excellent teacher.
What makes you so sure?
Just look at how many of his children grew up to be famous musicians themselves. He must have been doing something right.
You know what I think he was doing?
What?
Well, with 20 kids, a lot of dirty laundry.
And a lot of dirty dishes.
You know, that's a lot of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to make for a family picnic.
I don't think they had peanut butter in 18th century Germany.
Okay, sauerkraut sandwiches then. Speaking of which, now I'm hungry. Let's go make a sandwich.
Oh boy, a picnic!